Right now, your body is exhausted, but your mind won't stop. Thoughts are racing, worries about tomorrow, replays of today, that restless feeling that something needs to be figured out before you can rest. You've tried everything, counting breaths, forcing your mind blank, telling yourself to relax. Nothing works because you're approaching this backwards. The Buddha discovered something 26 centuries ago that changes how you understand what's happening right now. Your mind isn't broken. You're not doing this wrong. This restlessness has a specific cause, and that cause can be seen. What keeps you awake isn't the thoughts themselves. It's a confusion about who you actually are and what those thoughts mean. The Buddha taught 4 truths about suffering. You already know the first one. This struggle is real. Tonight, you'll discover the other 3, not as beliefs to accept, but as direct experiences you can verify in the next 3 hours. You'll see what's actually causing the restlessness. You'll understand why it persists even when you're trying to let go. And you'll experience something the Buddha called cessation, the moment suffering stops, not because you forced it, but because you finally saw what was creating it. This isn't relaxation. This is freedom. Settle in however you are, lying down, sitting up, eyes open or closed. What matters is that you're willing to see what's true. Let's begin with what the Buddha saw first. The night of his awakening, as the Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree, the first confusion he saw clearly was this. He had been believing every voice in his head was him speaking. For years he'd taken orders from thoughts, as if they were commands from his true self. You're not good enough. You need to achieve more. Something is wrong with you. He believed these voices because they spoke in first person. I am this. I need that. I should be different. But that night, watching closely without interference, he saw something that changed everything. There was a voice speaking, and there was something aware of that voice. 2 distinct things, not one. The voice said, "I'm failing," but something was already present to hear that statement, to register it, to know it was happening. Which one was actually him? If the voice saying, "I'm failing," was truly him, who was listening to it? This question unraveled everything he thought he knew about himself. And it's the same confusion keeping you awake right now. Since you woke up this morning, a voice has been narrating your life. I need coffee. That meeting was awkward. I'm behind. I'm anxious. It comments constantly, judges everything, predicts the future, criticizes the past. Over time, something dangerous happens. You stop noticing the voice and start assuming it is you. The Buddha called this the fundamental mistake. Not a sin, not a moral failure, misidentification. You confuse a process with an identity. Watch what actually happens when thoughts arise. A memory shows up out of nowhere. You didn't summon it. You didn't plan for it. It just appeared. A worry hijacks your attention while you're trying to focus on something else. An image flashes through your mind without warning. You didn't choose the timing. You didn't design the content. You didn't approve any of this. If thoughts were truly you would have complete control over them. You don't. That alone should raise questions about the story you've been told your whole life. Ajahn Brahm discovered this same truth one night in his monastery cell in Thailand. He'd been meditating for 18 hours, exhausted, and his mind turned vicious. The voice said, "You're terrible at this. You're the worst monk in Thailand. You should give up." He believed it. The criticism felt true, personal, urgent. Then a question appeared that changed his life. Wait, who's saying I'm terrible? If there's a voice saying, "I'm bad at meditation," and someone hearing that voice and judging it, which one is actually me? He sat with that question for hours, not trying to answer it intellectually, just watching. And slowly, like a knot coming undone, it unraveled everything. The mind feels personal because thoughts use the word I constantly. I failed. I need to fix this. I'm not enough. Language makes it feel intimate. But intimacy is not ownership. A radio can say your name. That doesn't make it you. The Buddha taught this directly in the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, his second teaching after awakening. He gathered his first students and asked them to examine experience closely. He taught about 5 aggregates, 5 categories that make up what we call a person: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Then he asked questions. Is form permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Lord. Is what is impermanent satisfactory or unsatisfactory? Unsatisfactory, Lord. Is it fitting to regard what is impermanent, unsatisfactory, and subject to change as, this is mine, this is myself, this is what I am? No, Lord. He went through each aggregate with the same questions. The same answers emerged. None of the 5 aggregates is self. All are processes, not entities. All are constantly changing, unreliable, not under our control. This isn't philosophy meant to be believed. It's observable reality meant to be seen. Your body changes every moment. Cells die and regenerate. The form you had as a child is completely gone. Is that form you? Feelings arise and pass. Pleasant becomes unpleasant. Neutral becomes intense. Which feeling is the real you? Perceptions shift based on conditions. What you perceive when tired differs from what you perceive when rested. Which perception is you? Mental formations, thoughts, habits, reactions change constantly. The thought patterns you had 10 years ago have transformed. Which pattern is you? Even consciousness itself arises based on conditions. It requires an object to be conscious of. It fluctuates between clear and foggy. Can that be you? The Buddha wasn't teaching nihilism. He wasn't saying you don't exist. He was saying, what you call you is a process, not a thing. And at night, this truth becomes impossible to ignore. When you lie in bed trying to rest, thoughts speed up. Everyone experiences this. The moment you want your mind to be quiet, it becomes loud. I should be asleep by now. What's wrong with me? Tomorrow will be a disaster. I can't do this. I'm broken. If these thoughts were truly you, why would they sabotage the rest you desperately need? Why would you attack yourself when you're most vulnerable? The answer is uncomfortable but liberating. They're not working in your interest. They're just conditioned patterns running on autopilot. Like a record player spinning the same scratched album, the music isn't trying to harm you. It's just playing what's been carved into the grooves. This is where the Buddha's teaching becomes practical medicine. The practice is simple but profound. Notice the difference between the thought and the awareness of the thought. When a sentence appears in your head, "I'll never fall asleep," something is already present to hear that sentence. That awareness doesn't panic when the thought arrives. It doesn't argue with the content. It doesn't add commentary. It simply knows a thought is present. This is directly observable. If you couldn't observe a thought, you wouldn't know it was there. Observation comes first. The thought comes second. Yet most people live as if thoughts come first and create awareness. They believe thinking is what makes them conscious. The Buddha reversed this completely. Awareness is already present. Thoughts appear within it like clouds passing through sky. The sky doesn't become the clouds. The clouds don't define the sky. Before sleep, you can experience this directly. A thought arises. Tomorrow will be terrible. Your usual pattern is to follow that thought immediately. Yes, the meeting is at 9. I'm not prepared. They'll notice. I'll fail. One thought spawns 10 more. Soon you're fully immersed in tomorrow's imagined disaster. But if you catch it early, if you see the first thought as a mental event rather than a fact, something shifts. Tomorrow will be terrible is recognized as a sentence passing through consciousness, not a prophecy, not truth, just language arising based on fatigue, habit, fear. The content may still be unpleasant. The worry might still feel real, but its authority weakens. It no longer feels like a prediction you must prepare for. It feels like weather moving through. This is why Buddhism teaches you not to fight thoughts. Fighting assumes they have power that must be defeated. Resistance feeds the loop. The mind interprets your resistance as evidence that the thought is important, dangerous, true. What you allow to be seen without reaction gradually loses energy. What you argue with multiplies and strengthens. This becomes especially clear at night. The more you try to force sleep, the more alert your mind becomes. The more you try to shut the voice up, the louder it gets. Why? Because forcing and shutting up are forms of fighting, and fighting keeps the nervous system engaged. The Buddha discovered something radically different. When you stop treating thoughts as commands that must be obeyed or enemies that must be defeated, they lose their grip naturally. Not through your effort, through clear seeing. A thought says, "You'll never fall asleep." Instead of believing it or fighting it, you simply note, "Thought about sleep appeared." No agreement, no rejection, just recognition. Something subtle but powerful happens with repetition. The brain learns that thoughts are not emergencies requiring immediate response. Anxiety drops because anxiety is fueled by believing thoughts, not by thoughts themselves. The sense of a solid, suffering self softens because that self is nothing more than a collection of believed thoughts. Self-hatred weakens because it depends entirely on taking internal criticism literally. The awareness that notices all of this, that sees thoughts arising and passing, that watches the whole show without getting lost in it, remains steady. Thoughts are frantic, repetitive, contradictory. Awareness is quiet. It doesn't rush ahead to tomorrow or back to yesterday. It doesn't need reassurance or validation. Buddhism points you to this, not as mystical experience, but as practical anchor. When you rest as the awareness, rather than as the thought stream, sleep comes naturally, not because you made it happen, because there's nothing left to manage. This is what the Buddha meant by anatta, not that you don't exist, but that what you've been calling you is actually a process you can observe. And in that observation lies the end of a particular kind of suffering, the suffering that comes from taking every thought personally, from believing every voice in your head is you speaking. Tonight, as thoughts arise before sleep, you have the opportunity to see this directly. Not to believe it because the Buddha said it, not to adopt it as philosophy, but to verify it in your own experience. Watch a thought appear. Notice that you didn't create it deliberately. Observe that something already present is aware of it. That's all. That simple observation, repeated, is the practice. The voice will still talk, but you'll stop living inside the commentary. You'll stop letting every sentence define you. And sleep will deepen, not because problems vanished, but because you're no longer fused with the voice describing them. This is the foundation the Buddha laid that night beneath the tree. Not compassion practices, not moral guidelines, not even meditation techniques. First, see the truth. The voice in your head is an event, not an identity. Once that's understood, suffering loses its primary grip, and sleep stops being a battlefield where you fight your own thoughts. It becomes what it was always meant to be, a natural return to rest when the day's work is done. Ajahn Chah once told his students about a monk who came to him in distress. The monk had been practicing meditation for years, but every night was torture. "Master, I lie down exhausted, but my mind won't rest. It races through tomorrow's schedule, replays today's mistakes, plans, conversations that haven't happened yet. I've tried everything, counting breaths, repeating mantras, forcing my mind to be still. Nothing works." Ajahn Chah smiled. "What is your mind doing right now as you tell me this?" The monk paused. "It's wanting you to give me a solution, wanting you to fix this problem. And if I give you a solution, then I'll finally be able to sleep." Ajahn Chah laughed gently. "You see, right now, in this moment, your mind is doing exactly what keeps you awake at night. It's reaching for something that isn't here. It's demanding that this moment give you something it can't give you yet." The monk looked confused. This reaching, this demanding, the Buddha called it tanha, craving, and it's not what you think it is. Most people hear the word craving and think of addiction, intense desire, wanting things you shouldn't want. But tanha is far more ordinary and far more pervasive than that. The Buddha taught that craving is simply wanting this moment to be different than it is. Right now, lying in bed, your body is tired, ready for sleep, but your mind is somewhere else entirely. It's in tomorrow's meeting, trying to control how it will unfold. It's in today's conversation, trying to rewrite what was said. It's in an imagined future where you finally have everything figured out and can rest. None of these places exist right now. They're mental constructions, but your mind treats them as if they're more real, more important, more urgent than this actual moment. The thoughts themselves seem productive. "I need to prepare for tomorrow. That sounds responsible. I should have handled that better. That sounds like healthy self-reflection. If I can just figure this out, everything will be okay. That sounds like problem solving." But look beneath the surface of these thoughts. Beneath every single one is a demand, an insistence, a craving for reality to be other than it is. The Buddha called this the second noble truth. Suffering arises from tanha, from craving, from thirst, from this constant reaching for what isn't present. Watch how this operates specifically at night. Your body has shut down for the day. Your muscles are ready to release. Your cells are prepared to repair and restore. But your mind keeps reaching forward, keeps grasping, keeps demanding. It wants reassurance about the future. Promise me tomorrow won't be a disaster. It wants closure about the past. Let me replay that conversation until I get it right. It wants certainty in an uncertain world. It wants control over what cannot be controlled. It wants answers that don't exist yet. And here's what makes craving so exhausting. When it doesn't get what it wants, and at midnight, it never does, it tightens. You feel this physically. Your jaw clenches. Your shoulders rise toward your ears. Your breathing becomes shallow, restricted. There's a restless energy in your chest, a feeling that you should be doing something, figuring something out, fixing something. You're lying down, but you're not resting. You're lying down while still running. The Buddha observed something crucial about craving. It promises relief, but never delivers it. Your mind whispers, "Just think about this one more time, and you'll have it figured out." Just rehearse that conversation once more, and you'll feel prepared. Just plan tomorrow perfectly, and then you can relax. But the relief never comes. Peace never arrives through satisfying craving. It only arrives when craving stops. Consider this honestly. How many genuine problems have you solved while lying in bed at night trying to fall asleep? Not worried about them, not mentally rehearsed them, actually solved them. The answer for most people is close to zero. The problems that got resolved happened during daylight hours, when you had access to action, to resources, to other people, to the actual circumstances that needed addressing. Yet every night, your mind tries again. Not because this strategy works, because craving is relentless in its promise that this time will be different. This time, if you just think about it right, you'll achieve the certainty you're seeking. This time, you'll get the closure you need. This time, thinking will finally bring peace. It's a trap that feeds itself. Each thought pretends to be the last one necessary, but there's always one more, and one more after that. The Buddha's teaching here is precise and uncomfortable. When your mind is racing before sleep, don't get caught in the content of what you're thinking about. That's a distraction. Instead, look at the structure beneath all those thoughts. Look at what your mind is actually demanding. Strip each thought down to its essential craving. I need to figure out what to say tomorrow. Beneath that, craving for control, for certainty, for guaranteed success. I should have said something different today. Beneath that, craving for the past to be different, for a reality that doesn't exist. What if everything falls apart? Beneath that, craving for safety, for protection from all possible harm. Once you see the craving clearly, Once you recognize the demand that reality be other than it is, something obvious emerges. No amount of thinking will satisfy it. The demand itself is the problem, not the uncertainty or imperfection of your life. This is where most people misunderstand what the Buddha taught about letting go. They think letting go means suppressing desire, becoming passive, not caring about anything. That's not what the Buddha meant at all. Letting go means seeing clearly that craving is unnecessary. It means recognizing that peace doesn't come from getting what you want. It comes from no longer insisting you must have it right now. There's a verse in the Dhammapada that states this directly. From craving comes grief. From craving comes fear. One freed from craving knows neither grief nor fear. Not one freed from desire completely. One freed from craving, from the demanding, grasping, insisting quality that turns normal wants into sources of suffering. When this insight lands, even briefly, your body responds immediately. The muscles that were clenched soften. The breath that was shallow deepens. The nervous system shifts out of fight mode. Sleep becomes possible, not because your life circumstances changed, not because tomorrow became certain, but because the struggle with this moment has paused. The practice the Buddha taught is simple, but requires courage. Instead of feeding craving by following every thought, observe the craving itself. Feel the urge to plan, to replay, to figure out, to control. Don't follow the urge into action, but also don't suppress it or push it away. Just let it be felt fully in your body. The tight chest, the restless energy, the subtle anxiety that says something must be done right now. This is uncomfortable at first. You've trained yourself for years to escape this discomfort by thinking, planning, distracting, scrolling. But something remarkable happens when craving is allowed to be felt without being acted upon. It burns itself out. Craving cannot survive without movement, without the fuel of your attention, following it into mental rehearsal and problem solving. When you stop feeding it, it weakens naturally. Night after night, if you practice this, your brain learns something it desperately needs to learn. That discomfort doesn't require immediate resolution. That not getting what you want right now is survivable. Eventually, your mind stops panicking at the mere presence of uncertainty. Restlessness decreases because craving loses its credibility, its authority over you. This doesn't mean you stop wanting things in your life. You'll still have preferences, goals, desires during the day when action is possible. But you stop demanding satisfaction in moments where it's impossible. And sleep is one of those moments. You cannot think your way into rest. You cannot force peace through mental effort. You can only stop chasing what isn't here and allow what is here to be enough. The monk who came to Ajahn Chah understood this finally, not through getting a technique, but through seeing the craving itself. "So there's nothing to do?" he asked. "There's everything to do," Ajahn Chah replied. "Stop doing. That's what there is to do." Tonight, as you lie down and thoughts arise about tomorrow, about today, about everything that needs fixing or figuring out, you have a choice. You can follow the thoughts as you always have, feeding the craving, hoping this time will be different. Or you can see them for what they are, manifestations of Tana, the wanting for this moment to be other than it is. And in seeing clearly, without judgment, without fighting, the grip loosens on its own. Not because you made it happen, but because craving cannot survive in the light of clear seeing. This is the second noble truth lived, not just understood, and it changes how you meet every sleepless moment that remains. A student once came to Thich Nhat Hanh in distress. "Teacher, I need help with my anger. It keeps coming back no matter what I do. I meditate. I practice mindfulness, but the anger returns. How do I deal with my anger?" Thich Nhat Hanh smiled gently. "Your anger? It's already gone." The student looked confused. "No, it's still here. I feel it." That was different anger. And now that one's gone too, what you're calling my anger is a constantly changing stream. There's no solid thing to deal with. The student sat quietly, processing this. Then slowly, something shifted in his face. "So I don't have to fix my anger. I just have to stop holding it in place?" "Yes," Thich Nhat Hanh replied. "Impermanence is already doing the work. You're just interfering." This is Anicca, the Buddha's teaching on impermanence. And it's not a comforting idea you tell yourself when things are hard. It's a tool that dismantles suffering at its root. The reason thoughts disturb you so deeply at night isn't because they're inherently painful. It's because you believe they'll last. Your mind assumes permanence by default. It treats temporary states as if they're permanent conditions. A bad mood feels like a condition you're stuck with, not a weather pattern passing through. Anxiety feels like a state that defines you, not a temporary surge of nervous system activation. A mistake you made today feels like a permanent stain on who you are, not a moment that's already receding into the past. This assumption that what you're experiencing now will continue quietly drives panic and resistance. Before sleep, this becomes painfully obvious. A memory appears from earlier today, and your body reacts as if it's happening again right now. Your heart rate increases. Your muscles tense. The memory is just an image in your mind, but your nervous system treats it as a present threat. a worry about tomorrow surfaces, and your entire system braces for disaster, as if that imagined future is already unfolding. Why does this happen? Because your mind believes the experience will continue unless you do something to stop it. The Buddha's teaching on impermanence cuts directly through this belief. He asks you to observe something simple but radical. Nothing you experience stays the same, even for a few seconds. Not thoughts, not emotions, not physical sensations, not even your awareness of these things. Everything is in constant motion, whether you like it or not, whether you notice it or not. You don't have to make change happen. It's already happening. Change is the nature of all conditioned things. Lie in bed right now and watch this closely. Don't take my word for it. Observe it directly. A thought appears, maybe a worry about tomorrow. If you don't grab it, if you don't follow it into a mental story, watch what happens to it. It shifts. The sharp edge dulls slightly. The image becomes less vivid. The emotional charge weakens. Within seconds, it morphs into something else, a different thought, a memory, a sensation, or it vanishes entirely, leaving just silence. The same thing happens with emotions. Fear spikes in your chest when you think about that meeting tomorrow. But if you don't feed it with more fearful thoughts, if you just let it be there, it doesn't stay at the same intensity. It pulses, peaks, then gradually dulls, fades, transforms into something softer, less acute. Even physical discomfort fluctuates constantly. That tension in your shoulders you've been carrying all day, if you pay attention to it without trying to change it, you'll notice it's not one solid block of tension. It tightens, then releases slightly, shifts location, intensifies in one spot while easing in another. Everything is moving, changing, flowing. This isn't theory or philosophy. This is observable reality happening in your direct experience right now. The reason most people never notice this is because they interfere immediately. A thought appears, and within milliseconds, you're arguing with it, analyzing it, trying to solve it. An emotion arises, and instantly you're judging whether it's good or bad, appropriate or inappropriate, trying to make it go away or hold on to it. A sensation surfaces, and your mind immediately labels it, "This is tension. I need to relax," and you've already moved away from the actual experience. This interference freezes the natural process of change. It's like grabbing a river and trying to hold it still. The water keeps moving, but you're creating turbulence with your grip. Observation, without interference, lets impermanence do its work naturally. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha taught his students to observe the arising and passing away of all phenomena, not to control them, not to improve them, just to see clearly that everything arises, exists briefly, and passes away. This is why the Buddha called impermanence a tool, not just a concept to understand. When you truly see, not intellectually grasp, but directly perceive, that your experience is changing on its own, you stop trying so hard to escape it. And the moment you stop trying to escape, suffering drops sharply. The pain or discomfort might still be present. The difficult emotion might still be moving through you, but the panic around it dissolves. Because panic depends on the belief that this state is permanent, that you're trapped in it, that it will never change unless you force it to change. When you see change happening naturally, that belief collapses, and with it, much of the suffering collapses too. Impermanence also breaks the illusion of a solid, fixed identity. At night, your mind tells you stories about who you are. I am anxious. I am broken. I am behind in life. These statements feel true. They feel like facts about a permanent self. But watch carefully. These are descriptions of temporary mental states, not facts about a solid, unchanging you. Right now you might feel anxious, but trace back through your day. Was there a moment this morning when you felt calm? A moment this afternoon when you were absorbed in something and anxiety wasn't present? The anxiety comes and goes. It's not a permanent feature of who you are. It's weather moving through. You might feel broken right now, lying awake when you desperately want to sleep. But haven't there been moments, maybe brief, maybe longer, when you felt whole, capable, okay? If you were truly, permanently broken, those moments wouldn't be possible. The feeling of brokenness is a temporary state, not an identity. The Buddha emphasized this because identity-based suffering is the heaviest kind to carry. When you believe pain is permanent and personal, I am this suffering, it becomes unbearable. When you see it as transient and impersonal, suffering is arising, it becomes workable. Impermanence removes the "this is who I am" story that keeps people stuck for years. The ego wants stability. It wants guarantees. It wants to know who you are and have that remain consistent forever. Impermanence threatens that illusion completely. It shows you that everything you think you are is constantly changing, constantly becoming something else. At first, this can feel frightening. If there's no permanent self, who am I? If everything changes, what can I hold on to? But once you stop fighting this truth, once you accept it fully, it brings a deeper kind of safety. The safety of knowing that no state, no matter how difficult, can imprison you forever. That anxiety you feel right now, it will change. Maybe in 5 minutes, maybe in an hour, but it will not stay at this intensity permanently. That feeling of being stuck, behind, not enough, it's already different than it was when you first lay down tonight, and it will continue to change as the night unfolds. Before sleep, the practice is not to repeat, "This will pass," like a mantra you're trying to believe. That turns impermanence into hope, which is still a form of craving, still wanting the moment to be different than it is. Instead, observe passing directly as it happens. Feel your breath change. One breath is shallow, the next slightly deeper, the one after that somewhere in between. No two breaths are exactly the same. Notice the gaps between thoughts. They're not uniform. Sometimes a gap lasts a second, sometimes longer. Sometimes thoughts arise so quickly, there seems to be no gap at all. But even that rapid-fire quality changes. Sense how physical sensations flicker rather than hold steady. That pressure in your chest isn't constant. It pulses, shifts location slightly, changes intensity moment by moment. This simple observation creates patience without any effort on your part. You stop rushing experiences toward resolution because you can see they're resolving themselves naturally. You stop demanding relief on your timeline because you're watching relief emerge in its own time as each difficult moment transforms into the next moment, which is always at least slightly different. You let time do what it already does best: end things. Over multiple nights of practicing this, just watching change happen without interfering, something profound occurs. Your mind stops catastrophizing temporary states. A bad day no longer defines your entire life. It's seen as what it is: one day, already receding into the past, already different than it was hours ago. A restless night doesn't become evidence of personal failure or permanent insomnia. It's one night among thousands, and it's already changing, even as you lie there. You develop trust in change itself, not optimism that everything will get better. That's still wanting things to be different, but trust that nothing stays the same, that movement is constant, that even the hardest moments are already on their way to becoming something else. This trust changes how you fall asleep fundamentally. You no longer panic when difficult thoughts appear because you've seen them fade so many times before. You know they're temporary visitors, not permanent residents. You no longer tense up when uncomfortable emotions arise because you've watched them transform and dissolve over and over. You trust their impermanent nature. Before sleep, impermanence is always available as a refuge. You don't have to create calm or force peace. You only have to watch change, doing what change does naturally. The Buddha taught that this practice alone, simply seeing impermanence clearly in your direct experience, can lead to liberation. Not because impermanence is a comforting thought, but because seeing it directly undermines the beliefs that create suffering, that pain is permanent, that states are solid, that you are trapped. None of these beliefs survive contact with reality when you're actually paying attention. Tonight, as you lie there and thoughts arise, Emotions surge. Sensations pulse through your body. You have a choice. You can treat them all as solid problems that need solving, permanent states that need escaping, fixed aspects of who you are that need changing. Or you can watch them the way you'd watch clouds moving across the sky, acknowledging they're there, noticing their shapes and textures, and seeing clearly that they're already becoming something else, already on their way to somewhere new. This watching is not passive resignation. It's active engagement with reality as it actually is, rather than, as your fear tells you, it will remain forever. And in that engagement, suffering loses the foundation it needs to persist, because suffering requires you to believe in permanence. It cannot survive when you see clearly that everything, including suffering itself, is changing moment by moment by moment. Ajahn Brahm tells a story about building a brick wall at his monastery in the Australian outback. He and another monk spent weeks mixing mortar, laying bricks, making sure every line was straight and level. When they finished, they stepped back to admire their work. The wall stretched nearly 30 meters long, hundreds of perfectly placed bricks. Ajahn Brahm felt proud, until he noticed 2 bricks near the middle that weren't quite aligned. 2 bricks out of hundreds, barely visible unless you were looking for them. But once he saw those 2 imperfect bricks, he couldn't see anything else. His eyes went straight to them every time he walked past the wall. For weeks, those 2 bricks consumed him. We should rebuild that section. People will notice. It's not good enough. His teacher finally said, "Ajahn Brahm, you built a wall with hundreds of good bricks, but all you see are 2 bad ones. When are you going to let those 2 bricks go and see the beautiful wall you actually built?" That question changed everything for him, because he realized he wasn't just doing this with walls. He was doing it with his entire life. Every day had hundreds of moments, but he spent his nights lying awake, focused on the 2 or 3 moments that went wrong, that didn't meet his expectations, that should have been different. This is the exhaustion nobody talks about. Not from working too hard during the day, from fighting with what already happened after the day is over. Your mind right now, as you lie here, isn't resting. It's arguing. Arguing with the conversation that already ended hours ago. Arguing with the decision you already made. Arguing with moments now sealed in the past, unchangeable. This argument runs constantly in the background of your mind, but before sleep, it becomes impossible to ignore. During the day, you can distract yourself with tasks, with movement and activity. But at night, when your body is still, the argument becomes loud. It sounds like self-reflection. Let me think through what happened today. It sounds like preparation. I need to figure out how to handle this better tomorrow. But look closer at what's actually happening. You're not reflecting. You're replaying the same scene over and over, trying to make it come out differently. You're not preparing. You're rehearsing conversations with people who aren't there, in situations that don't exist yet. This is resistance. the refusal to let reality be what it is. The Buddha made a distinction that most people miss. Pain is unavoidable. Resistance is optional. A difficult thing happened today. That's pain. It hurt when it happened. That's part of being human, part of being alive. But now, hours later, lying in bed, you're creating new suffering by refusing to accept that it happened the way it happened. The event itself isn't hurting you anymore. What's hurting you is the mental war you're waging against it. This war consumes enormous energy that your body desperately needs for rest, for repair, for restoration. That's why sleep doesn't always fix the exhaustion you feel. You can sleep for 8 hours and wake up still tired because you spent those hours trying to fall asleep while simultaneously fighting with reality. Notice how resistance lives in your body right now. Your jaw is tight, clenched, as if you're holding something in your teeth that you won't let go of. Your shoulders are raised, tense, as if you're bracing for impact from something that already passed. Your breath is shallow, restricted, caught in your upper chest, instead of dropping deep into your belly. This is the posture of someone ready for battle. But there's no battle to fight right now. The day is over. The only fight happening is the one in your mind. Sleep requires surrender, not giving up on life, but giving up on changing what's already happened. Resistance keeps your nervous system in alert mode, signaling danger when there is none. Many people confuse acceptance with approval, and this confusion keeps them trapped in resistance. They think, if I accept that this happened, I'm saying it was okay. I'm being weak. That's not what acceptance means in Buddhism. Acceptance simply means you stop denying what already exists. You acknowledge what is true. This thing happened, in this way, at this time. You can acknowledge that a conversation was unfair without spending the night mentally redoing it. You can recognize that something was painful without forcing yourself to be okay with the pain. You can see that someone acted badly without replaying the scene endlessly. The event itself, that's reality. The endless replaying, revising, re-arguing, that's resistance. And resistance is what drains you. Imagine you had a difficult conversation today. Someone said something that hurt. Your response wasn't what you wished it had been. That conversation happened. It unfolded in a particular way. Those words were spoken. That's the reality of what occurred. But now, lying here, your mind is replaying it. I should have said this instead. If only I'd responded that way. Each replay burns energy. Each mental revision attempts to change an unchangeable past. Fighting with it is like standing in your living room, arguing with a photograph, trying to make the people in the picture move differently. The Buddha's teaching here is uncomfortable, but liberating. What happened, happened. The only question is, will you let it be what it was, or will you exhaust yourself trying to change it in your mind. Before sleep, try something simple and difficult. Instead of replaying the day, state the facts without commentary. This conversation happened. These words were said. This feeling arose in me. No blame attached. No justification added. No revision attempted. Just simple acknowledgement of what occurred. You may feel a wave of discomfort when you do this. That discomfort is withdrawal from resistance. It's like a muscle that's been clenched for hours, finally releasing. The release itself can be painful at first. That's normal. But beneath the initial discomfort is relief. When resistance drops, even for a moment, your body responds immediately. The muscles in your face soften. Your shoulders drop away from your ears. Your breath deepens naturally, without effort. Your mind becomes less sharp-edged, less cutting toward yourself and others. This isn't a relaxation technique working its magic. This is your nervous system recognizing that the battle is over, that it's safe to stand down. Resistance also feeds identity in ways you might not realize. The story you tell about who you are depends partly on what you fight against. If you spend your nights arguing with how you were wronged, you become someone who was wronged. If you spend your nights revising what you should have said, you become someone who never gets it right. These identities feel important, even precious. They feel like the truth of who you are. But when you stop resisting reality, these identities lose their fuel. And that can feel threatening. Many people would rather stay exhausted than let go of the familiar story they tell about themselves. The Buddha saw through this attachment. He understood that maintaining an identity, even a painful one, costs enormous energy. Every day, without realizing it, you spend energy defending an image of yourself, making sure the story stays consistent, making sure you see yourself a certain way. At night, when your conscious control falters, anxiety spikes. Your mind scrambles to keep the narrative together, to maintain the identity. But what if you didn't have to maintain anything? What if reality was allowed to be what it is, without your constant management and revision? Letting go of resistance feels like losing control. And, in a way, it is. You're losing control over a past that you never actually controlled in the first place. But what you're really losing is unnecessary labor, the exhausting work of trying to rewrite history in your head every night. The moment you stop trying to fix the past mentally, something shifts. The past loses some of its emotional charge. Not because anything got resolved or corrected, but because you stopped feeding it your energy. A memory without resistance attached to it is just an image, just information. It doesn't have teeth anymore. It can't bite you the way it does when you're actively fighting with it. This doesn't make you passive or resigned in your actual life. During the day, action still matters. Decision-making still matters. Learning from experience still matters. But nighttime is not the place for resistance. There's nothing productive you can do at midnight lying in bed. The conversation can't be re-had. The decision can't be unmade. The moment can't be relived. All you can do is acknowledge what happened and let it settle into the past, where it belongs. Buddhism teaches you to align your effort with reality rather than fighting against it. During the day, when action is possible, act. Make amends if needed. Have the difficult conversation. Make a different choice going forward. But at night, when action is impossible, let it be impossible. Stop trying to act in your mind when your body is lying still. There's a teaching attributed to the Buddha: you are not punished for your anger. You are punished by your anger. The same applies to resistance. Reality isn't punishing you for resisting it. Your resistance itself is the punishment. It doesn't protect you from pain. It multiplies it. It takes a moment that hurt when it happened and makes it hurt again and again, fresh each time you replay it. Tonight, you can choose something different. Not because you're suddenly able to accept everything that happened today. Not because you've forgiven everyone or made peace with everything. But because you're tired, and the resistance is making you more tired, and continuing the fight achieves nothing except keeping you awake. Just for tonight, try stating what happened without arguing with it. Just for these hours of darkness, let the day be over. Tomorrow, you can pick up the work of living again. You can address what needs addressing, change what needs changing. But tonight, let the wall you built today be the wall you built, imperfect bricks and all. Stop staring at what went wrong and let yourself see that despite everything, you made it through another day. That's enough for now. That has to be enough. Because you cannot rest and resist at the same time. One requires letting go. The other requires holding on. And your body is asking, begging, for you to finally let go. A student once approached the Zen master Linji with a question that had troubled him for years. "Master, what is my true self?" Linji suddenly shouted, "Who is asking?" The student, startled, began to answer, "I am." Linji interrupted, "Show me this, I." The student looked down at his hands, gestured to his body, opened his mouth to speak. Linji cut him off again. "Those aren't you. Those are hands, body, words. Where is the I that owns them?" The student fell silent. In that silence, something profound happened. The frantic search for a solid, permanent self collapsed, and what remained wasn't emptiness or nothingness. It was freedom. This is what happens in the dark when you stop maintaining who you think you are. All day long, from the moment you wake until now, you've been maintaining something. An image, a position, a story about who you are. You may not consciously think about it, but enormous mental energy goes into protecting this structure. How you're seen by others, how you see yourself, whether you're right or wrong, capable or incompetent, moral or flawed, strong or weak, whether you're ahead in life or behind, whether you're the person who was wronged or the person who made mistakes. Buddhism doesn't treat this as a personality trait or character flaw. It treats it as a process, a very costly one. The self you think you are is not a solid thing that exists independently. It's assembled moment by moment out of thoughts, memories, comparisons, and reactions. Because this assembly happens constantly, it feels permanent, like a building that's always been there. But the Buddha points out something unsettling. If you stop feeding this structure, it weakens. If you stop long enough, it dissolves. Not because you're destroying yourself, because what you've been calling yourself was never as solid as you believed. During the day, this constructed self feels necessary. You need it to function, to make decisions, to navigate social situations. But at night, when there's no one to perform for, no one to convince, nothing to achieve, the self becomes a burden. This is why many people struggle to sleep. The machinery that maintains identity doesn't know how to turn itself off. Before sleep, pay attention to what your mind is defending. A reputation you've built over years? I'm the responsible one. I'm the one who has it together. A past choice you need to justify? I made the right decision leaving that job, moving to this city, ending that relationship. A future version of yourself that you're desperately trying to become? I should be further along by now. I should have achieved more. The need to be right in an argument that's already over. They need to understand that I was right and they were wrong. The need to justify why you are where you are in life. I'm here because of these circumstances, these obstacles, these other people's choices. These defenses feel automatic, instinctive, but they're learned habits, patterns you've reinforced over years, and they keep your nervous system active long after your body is ready to rest. The Buddha was clear about this. The self isn't the problem. Clinging to it is. The effort required to hold your story together creates tension throughout your entire body. The fear of losing your story creates anxiety that keeps you awake. Sleep becomes difficult because letting go of who you think you are feels like disappearing entirely. This fear is subtle. It shows up as seemingly reasonable thoughts. If I stop thinking, I'll lose control of my life. If I stop reviewing everything, something important will slip through. If I don't maintain my identity, who will I be? But these thoughts aren't about safety or well-being. They're about identity survival. Your mind is protecting a narrative, not your actual welfare. There's a teaching from the Pali Canon where the Buddha spoke directly about this. He said, "Heavy is the burden of the aggregates. The carrier of the burden is the person. Taking up the burden is suffering. Laying down the burden is bliss. The burden isn't life itself. It's the constant carrying of a constructed self through time. At night, this carrying becomes unbearable. Your body is lying still, but your mind is still hauling this weight, still maintaining this structure. Before sleep, the Buddha invites you to try something radical. Drop the role. Not permanently, not forever, just for now, just for these hours of darkness. You don't need to be successful right now. You don't need to be improving or progressing or becoming better. You don't need to be understood or validated or seen correctly. You don't need to be a good person or overcome being a bad person. You don't need to have an answer to your life, a solution to your problems, a clear direction forward. All of that can resume tomorrow. The story can pick up again when the sun rises. But right now, in the dark, you don't need to be anyone. This is harder than it sounds, because the self is addicted to continuity. It wants to exist across time. It wants yesterday's you, and today's you, and tomorrow's you to form one continuous, consistent narrative. But sleep interrupts continuity. Conscious control fades. The narrative breaks. And the self panics because it depends on constant reinforcement. Watch what happens when you stop feeding the story. A thought arises about who you are. I'm someone who struggles with sleep. I'm anxious. I'm behind. Your habitual pattern is to continue that thought, to elaborate on it, to build evidence for it. Instead, just let it end. Don't pick it up. Don't argue with it, or try to replace it with a better thought. Just let it finish and dissolve. There may be a moment of emptiness or disorientation when you do this. That's completely normal. It's the space that was previously occupied by constant self-talk, constant identity maintenance. And in that space, something surprising becomes clear. Awareness remains. You're still here, still present, still conscious. Breathing continues on its own. Your heart keeps beating. Your body knows how to function. You exist without needing a story about who you are. This directly contradicts the mind's deepest fear, that identity is required for existence, that without your story, you'll somehow cease to be. But here you are, aware, breathing, existing, without maintaining anything. This recognition is deeply, profoundly relieving. The nervous system relaxes because it no longer has to protect an image, defend a position, or maintain consistency across time. There's nothing to defend in the dark, no audience watching, no scoreboard keeping track, no comparison happening. You can simply be whatever you are in this moment without trying to make it match who you were yesterday or who you're supposed to become tomorrow. Over time, if you practice this regularly before sleep, something changes about how you relate to yourself during the day as well. You still act, still plan, still care about things. But there's less rigidity, less brittleness. Criticism stings less because you're not entirely identified with the story being criticized. Praise matters less because you're not dependent on it to maintain your sense of self. You recover faster from mistakes because mistakes are just events, not permanent marks on a solid identity. The self you were defending with such intensity becomes more flexible, more fluid, easier to work with. Sleep improves dramatically because your mind learns through repeated experience that nothing bad happens when the story pauses. Letting go stops feeling dangerous. It starts feeling natural, even restful. The Buddha never asked anyone to destroy their self or pretend it doesn't exist at the conventional level. He asked people to see it clearly for what it actually is, a useful but temporary construction. Like clothes you put on in the morning and take off at night, necessary for certain activities, but not who you fundamentally are. When the construction isn't needed, like now, in the dark, when there's nothing to do and nowhere to be, you can set it down. Before sleep, the constructed self is not needed. There's no function for it to perform. The moment you stop maintaining it, a massive amount of energy is freed. Energy that was going into defending, justifying, comparing, maintaining. That energy returns to your body as the capacity to rest. Not because you've done something to create rest, but because you've stopped doing the thing that was preventing it. Tonight, notice the thoughts that try to maintain your identity. I'm the kind of person who, I always, I never, people see me as, I should be. Notice them, and then, just for now, just for these hours, let them drop away unanswered. Don't replace them with better thoughts about yourself. Don't argue with them or try to correct them. Just let them fall away like leaves dropping from a tree. What remains isn't nothing. It's not a void or an absence. What remains is awareness without a story attached to it, breathing without someone who breathes, existing without needing to be someone in particular. This is what the Zen student discovered in that moment of silence with Linji. When he stopped trying to find a solid self, when the search collapsed, he didn't disappear. He was more present, more here, more free than he'd ever been. Because he was no longer using his energy to maintain an image. He was simply being what he already was. Tonight, you have the same opportunity. Let the day's identity rest. Let the story pause. Let the constant self-narration fall silent. Tomorrow, you can pick it all up again if you need to. The roles will still be there. The responsibilities will still exist. The story can continue. But for now, just be here without being anyone. Breathe without being a breather. Exist without carrying the weight of who you think you should be. This isn't loss. This is rest. And rest is what your body has been asking for all along. The Buddha once taught using a story about a farmer who was too eager for results. This farmer planted seeds in his field, watered them carefully, and then couldn't wait to see them grow. Every few hours, he went out to check on them. But checking wasn't enough. He dug them up to see if roots were forming. "Why aren't you growing yet? Grow, grow." He replanted them, watered them again, then dug them up once more to inspect their progress. Of course, the crops died, not from lack of care, from interference. The wise farmer, the Buddha explained, plants seeds, waters them, provides the right conditions, and then trusts the process. A student asked, "But Master, how do we know the seeds will grow if we're not checking?" The Buddha replied, "You don't make them grow. Growth is already the nature of seeds when conditions are right. Your job isn't to force growth. Your job is to stop interfering. This is what sleep requires. Not force, non-interference." The deepest fear most people carry isn't about dramatic situations. It's about quiet moments like this. The fear of losing control. Before sleep, your mind resists drifting off because drifting feels like disappearing, like letting go of the steering wheel while the vehicle is still moving. Buddhism looks directly at this fear and names it clearly: unnecessary. You've been trained to believe that constant control keeps you safe, planning ahead so nothing catches you off guard, monitoring your thoughts so you don't lose track, thinking through scenarios so you're prepared. Your mind has learned to equate mental activity with protection. Thinking equals safety. Vigilance equals security. So when sleep approaches and control naturally begins to loosen, your mind panics. It floods you with thoughts, memories, concerns, anything to stay in charge. The Buddha doesn't ask you to force surrender. That would just be more control disguised as letting go. Instead, he asks you to notice something already happening. As you lie here right now, control is fading on its own. Your thoughts are becoming less coherent, more fragmented. Attention is starting to drift and wander. The ability to hold a clear narrative is weakening. And yet something remains aware of all of this. That awareness doesn't depend on your effort. You're not producing it through concentration. You're not sustaining it through willpower. It's simply present, quietly registering everything: the fading, the drifting, the approaching silence. Even as thoughts lose coherence and control slips away, awareness continues. Still here, still noticing. This directly contradicts your mind's deepest belief, that control keeps you existing, that without it, you'll cease to be. Notice how this plays out every single night. You don't decide the exact moment sleep begins. It happens to you. You don't control the transition. It unfolds on its own. Control fails every night, and nothing catastrophic occurs. You don't fall apart when conscious control lapses. You don't stop existing when you stop managing your mind. Yet despite this nightly evidence, your mind continues to treat letting go as a threat. The fear isn't really about sleep itself. The fear is that if you stop managing your mind, something will go wrong. Something important will be forgotten. Some problem will go unsolved. Some disaster will happen because you weren't vigilant. The Buddha invites you to test this fear directly through experience. Let control weaken right now without intervening. Let your attention float wherever it wants to go. Let thoughts break apart into fragments that don't make complete sense. See what actually happens when you stop being the manager. What happens isn't chaos. It's continuity without effort. Breathing continues on its own, without you directing each breath. Your heart keeps beating without you remembering to make it beat. The body remains safe without your supervision. Awareness doesn't blink out or disappear. It stays present, watching the whole process unfold. The mind's role as supervisor is revealed to be optional. You don't need to be on duty. The body knows how to rest. Sleep knows how to arrive. This realization builds trust at a level deeper than intellectual belief. You don't have to convince yourself that it's safe to let go. You don't have to repeat affirmations. You simply experience, night after night, that release doesn't equal danger. Your nervous system learns this through direct exposure, through repeated evidence that letting go doesn't result in harm. And this trust carries over into your waking life. You stop micromanaging every thought and feeling that arises during the day. You allow emotions to surface without immediately trying to fix them or push them away. You stop panicking when thoughts lose clarity under stress because you've seen what happens when mental clarity fades. Awareness remains. You've witnessed what happens when control drops away. Nothing breaks. You don't disappear. Before sleep, this lesson becomes especially powerful. Instead of trying to make yourself fall asleep, which never works, allow the natural loss of control to happen. You'll feel the urge to reassert thinking, to grab hold of your mind and steer it back towards something manageable. Notice that urge and then let it pass without acting on it. Your mind gradually learns that it doesn't need to be on duty all the time, that there are hours when vigilance can rest, when the manager can step down. Many people unknowingly resist sleep because they've learnt to equate letting go with vulnerability. Vulnerability feels dangerous, so they stay alert, stay in control, stay managing their thoughts, even though their body is exhausted. Buddhism reframes vulnerability as the natural state of being alive. Every night you release conscious control. Every morning it returns. This has happened thousands of times in your life already. There's no evidence that control is what holds you together. In fact, The opposite is true. The times you sleep most deeply are the times when you let go most completely. As this understanding deepens through experience, anxiety around sleep naturally fades. You no longer feel the compulsive need to monitor the process of falling asleep. You stop checking whether you're falling asleep fast enough. The body is allowed to take over and do what it already knows how to do. Buddhism doesn't romanticize this process or make it mystical. It treats it as a simple, functional insight. When your system trusts, through experience, that awareness persists, even without effort, it stops burning energy on unnecessary vigilance. The chronic tension of always being the manager, always being in charge, that tension releases. And in that release, sleep becomes possible, not because you made it happen, but because you stopped preventing it. Eventually, after enough nights of practicing this, surrender stops feeling like loss. It starts feeling like relief. You stop bracing against the darkness, against the unknown of unconsciousness. You stop clinging to thought as if it were a life raft, because you've discovered that control was never the source of safety. Awareness was always there, quietly present, even as your conscious mind pretended to be in charge. When you finally let go at night, really let go, you don't disappear into nothingness. You discover something surprising. You were never the one holding everything together in the first place. The breath was breathing itself. The heart was beating itself. Awareness was being aware without your help. Life was living itself through you, not because of your constant management, but despite your interference. There's a line from the Heart Sutra, though different Buddhist schools interpret it in different ways: no attainment and nothing to attain. Nothing you need to grasp. Nothing you need to achieve. Nothing you need to control. Everything is already functioning. Everything is already in process. Your only job is to stop interfering with the natural process of rest. Like the farmer in the Buddha's story, you plant the conditions for sleep: a comfortable position, a quiet space, the end of the day's activities. And then you trust the process. You let go. You stop digging up the seeds to check if they're growing. Growth happens on its own when you stop interfering. Sleep arrives on its own when you stop trying to force it. Rest emerges naturally when you release the exhausting work of constant control. Tonight, right now, you have the opportunity to test this directly. Not by believing it, but by simply allowing what's already happening to continue without your interference. Control is already fading. Thoughts are already fragmenting. The transition towards sleep is already beginning. You don't have to make any of this happen. You only have to stop stopping it. Let your attention wander where it will. Let thoughts dissolve into images and sensations. Let the familiar sense of being in charge gradually soften and blur. Nothing bad will happen. You won't be lost. You won't disappear. You'll simply rest. Deeply, naturally, completely. And in the morning, when awareness returns and control reassembles itself, you'll remember you never needed to hold so tightly. The seeds were always growing on their own. You just needed to stop digging them up to check. Tonight, let them grow. Let sleep come. Let control go. Trust what the Buddha pointed to, that things unfold naturally when conditions are right and interference stops. Your only work is to let that unfolding happen. And that's not work at all. It's rest. At Plum Village, Thich Nhat Hanh's monastery in southern France, monks practice something every evening that most people never do. Before sleep, they sit quietly in their rooms and review the day that just ended, not to judge themselves, not to criticize or fix, but to understand. They ask themselves, what seeds did I water today? Did I water seeds of anger or seeds of kindness? Seeds of fear or seeds of peace? Seeds of judgment or seeds of compassion? A young monk once asked Thich Nhat Hanh, "Teacher, why does this matter? The day is already over. I can't change what happened." Thich Nhat Hanh replied gently, "The day is over, yes, but the seeds you watered are still growing. What you gave attention to today will be stronger tomorrow. What you ignored today will weaken. You're not reviewing the past. You're setting conditions for who you become. This is karma, not cosmic payback or divine punishment. Conditioning through attention. Most people completely underestimate the final moments of the day. They treat them as a collapse into unconsciousness, a passive shutdown where nothing important happens. But Buddhism understands those moments very differently. As a handover, the conscious, effortful mind loosens its grip, and whatever has been repeated, believed, and rehearsed throughout the day sinks deeper into the system. This isn't mysticism or metaphor. It's how conditioning actually works. Your mind doesn't reset when you sleep, like a computer shutting down and starting fresh. It consolidates. Whatever patterns were strengthened before sleep get carried forward into tomorrow. The emotional tones you go to bed with, the unresolved tensions you carry into the dark, the habitual reactions you rehearsed one more time, these don't vanish overnight. They're reinforced. This is why the last mental states of your day matter far more than most people realize. Most nights, the mind feeds itself the same diet without anyone noticing. Replays of conflict from earlier, self-judgment about what you did or didn't do, fear about what tomorrow might bring, regret about opportunities that passed. The problem isn't that these thoughts occur. Difficult thoughts are part of being human. The problem is that they're consumed passively, without awareness, night after night, until they become the background music of your mind. Whatever you repeatedly engage with becomes familiar. Whatever becomes familiar becomes your default state. The Buddha taught that we are shaped by our thoughts. We become what we repeatedly think. Not because thinking has magical power, but because attention is like water. Whatever you water grows. Buddhism approaches this without moral panic or pressure to be positive. It doesn't tell you to force happy thoughts before bed or repeat affirmations you don't believe. That would just add more craving and resistance to an already tired mind. Instead, it teaches something far more effective and honest. Incline the mind toward clarity and non-hostility. Before sleep, you're not trying to improve yourself or become a better person by morning. You're setting conditions. There's a crucial difference here. Improvement implies struggle, force, dissatisfaction with what is. Setting conditions implies alignment, working with reality, providing what's needed for natural growth. You're simply deciding which mental states you'll stop feeding and which ones you'll allow to remain as you drift towards sleep. There's a traditional practice from the Vinaya, the monastic code, that outlines evening reflection. 3 questions monks ask themselves before sleep. Did I cause harm today? To myself or others? Did I live with awareness? Or did I move through the day on autopilot? What did I learn that I didn't know this morning? These aren't asked to generate guilt or shame. They're asked to generate understanding. When the day is reviewed with honesty and kindness, not harsh judgment but clear seeing, the mind settles naturally. There's nothing left unacknowledged, no unfinished business screaming for attention in the dark. The mind before sleep is especially impressionable because your defenses are low. The analytical layer that protects you during the day weakens. Emotional memory strengthens. This is why bedtime rumination has such a powerful impact on your nervous system and mood. But the same vulnerability that makes negative rumination so damaging can be used skillfully for conditioning toward peace. Notice the tone of your mind as the day ends. Is it harsh toward you, demanding, urgent, and critical? This tone doesn't stay contained in your thoughts. It imprints directly into your nervous system. You go to sleep with that harshness in your body, and you wake up with it still there. Over time, it becomes your baseline way of relating to yourself. Buddhism invites you to end the day without hostility toward your own experience. This doesn't mean you have to like everything that happened. It doesn't mean approving of your choices or pretending everything is fine. It means dropping the internal attack, stopping the war you're waging against yourself for being human. Self-directed aggression before sleep is especially damaging because there's no counterbalance. During the day, you might take action, make amends, course correct. But at night, there's no action possible, no correction available. There's only repetition of the attack over and over, with no resolution. Non-hostility isn't indifference or not caring. It's the absence of violence toward your own mind. When a regret appears about something you said today, you don't punish yourself for having that regret. You acknowledge it and let it be. When fear arises about tomorrow, you don't shame yourself for feeling afraid. You allow the fear to exist without escalating it through judgment. This simple shift from hostility to allowing changes conditioning at a fundamental level. Your brain gradually learns that mistakes are survivable without self-attack. That fear doesn't require shame on top of fear. That awareness can hold discomfort without adding cruelty to discomfort. Over weeks and months of ending your days this way, something shifts. Chronic anxiety decreases. Self-criticism loses its automatic quality. Not because you've become perfect, but because you've stopped reinforcing the pattern of internal violence every single night. Buddhism also emphasizes what you recall before sleep, not just what you avoid. Not recollection of your achievements or what you got done, but recollection of understanding. Remembering what you learned tonight through these hours. That thoughts aren't commands requiring obedience. That craving is optional, not inevitable. That experiences pass on their own. Remembering that the identity you defend all day is constructed, not solid. That control is optional, not required. That nothing about being human requires self-attack. These reminders don't function as beliefs you're trying to convince yourself of. They function as orientation. What you recall before sleep becomes the lens through which your mind organizes experience during sleep and upon waking. If the lens is fear, if the last thoughts before sleep are anxious and attacking, you wake up braced for threat. If the lens is clarity, if the last moments are characterized by understanding and non-hostility, you wake up steadier, more resourced. Many people unknowingly sabotage themselves every night. They spend hours during the day trying to cultivate discipline, practicing meditation, reading wisdom teachings, working on themselves. Then they spend the final hour before sleep feeding their mind chaos, conflict, harsh self-judgment, and fear. Buddhism sees this as wasted effort, not because the daytime practice doesn't matter, but because conditioning doesn't respond to intention alone. It responds to repetition, to what actually happens, night after night. This is why monks in training are taught to guard the mind at night with special care, not through force or suppression, but through wise restraint. They don't indulge mental drama when the mind is most impressionable and defenseless. They don't rehearse identity stories about who they are or should be. They don't feed resentment by replaying wrongs. They don't feed fantasy by escaping into imagination. They allow simplicity to settle in, just breath, just body lying down, just the natural transition toward rest. Tonight, you have the same choice monks make in their monasteries. You can review your day with the 3 questions. Did I cause harm? Did I live with awareness? What did I learn? Not to generate guilt, but to close the day with understanding. You can notice the tone of your mind and soften it if it's harsh, not forcing positivity, but dropping active hostility toward yourself. You can recall what you understand now that you didn't understand hours ago. The insights about craving, about impermanence, about the constructed nature of self. These aren't just ideas to think about. They're seeds you're watering in the final moments before consciousness fades. And what you water now grows while you sleep. Not magically or mysteriously, but through the simple mechanism of conditioning. Repetition creates neural pathways. Pathways become habits. Habits become character. The person you are tomorrow is shaped partly by what you reinforce tonight. This isn't pressure, it's power. You have more influence over who you become than you've been taught to believe. Not through dramatic transformations or peak experiences, but through what you do in these quiet moments that no one else sees. The moments right before sleep when the day releases you and tomorrow hasn't arrived yet. These moments are yours. Use them wisely. Not to fix yourself or force peace, but to set conditions. To water the seeds that lead toward freedom rather than the seeds that lead toward suffering. As Thich Nhat Hanh taught those young monks, the day is over, but what you watered is still growing. Choose carefully what grows, not just tonight, but every night. Because over time, those seeds become your life. A student traveled a great distance to study with Ajahn Chah at his forest monastery in Thailand. On his first day, eager and full of questions, he approached the teacher. "Master, how do I quiet my mind?" Ajahn Chah looked at him and said nothing. The student waited, then left confused. Second day, same question. "Master, please, teach me how to make my mind quiet." Again, silence. By the third day, the student was frustrated. "Master, please, I've traveled so far. How do I make my mind quiet?" Ajahn Chah finally spoke. "Go into the forest. Sit under a tree for 1 hour. Then come back and tell me, is the forest quiet?" The student did as instructed. He walked into the forest, sat beneath a large tree, and stayed there for an hour. When he returned, he answered confidently, "Yes, Master. The forest is very quiet." Ajahn Chah shook his head. "Wrong. The forest is full of sound. Birds calling, insects buzzing, wind moving through leaves, branches creaking. The forest isn't quiet. Your talking is loud. When you stop talking, you hear what was always there." The student sat with this for a moment, then asked, So I don't need to create silence? No, Ajahn Chah replied. You need to stop covering it. Most people are afraid of silence. Not the silence of a quiet room, but internal silence. The moment thoughts begin to slow down, discomfort appears. Your mind rushes to fill the gap with something, anything, a memory, a fantasy, a worry, a plan. The Buddha observed this reaction clearly and named it without judgment or drama, addiction to mental stimulation. Silence feels threatening because it removes your usual reference points. No story to follow, no problem to solve, no identity to maintain or defend. For a mind that's been trained to exist through constant activity, silence feels like groundlessness, like standing at the edge of something vast, with nothing to hold on to. This is why many people unconsciously avoid falling asleep even when exhausted. Sleep requires passing through silence, and silence exposes what the mind normally keeps hidden behind noise. Before sleep, this becomes especially clear. As your mind begins to slow down naturally, gaps appear between thoughts. At first, these gaps are brief, a second, maybe just a fraction of a second. Most people immediately fill them with new thinking because the absence feels uncomfortable, even slightly threatening. But Buddhism trains you to do something different, to stay in those gaps without reaching for the next thought. When you remain in the silence without trying to escape it or fill it, something important happens. Your nervous system begins to reset. Silence is not neutral to the body. It carries a signal, a message that penetrates deeper than words. It signals safety, no threat detected, no action required, no emergency present. This is why genuine silence, once you stop resisting it, feels deeply relieving. The discomfort people feel around internal silence isn't caused by the silence itself. It's caused by withdrawal from constant mental stimulation. Your mind has been trained for decades to self-soothe through thinking, through planning, analyzing, remembering, imagining. When that stimulation is suddenly removed, unease surfaces, not because something is wrong, but because you're experiencing withdrawal from a habitual pattern. Buddhism understands this completely and doesn't pathologize it or make it mean something is broken in you. It simply encourages patience. Stay with the discomfort without adding story to it. If you allow silence to remain without labeling it as good or bad, without judging yourself for feeling uncomfortable, without trying to deepen it or achieve some special state, it stabilizes on its own. You begin to sense presence without narration, awareness without constant commentary running alongside it. This is deeply unfamiliar to most people, which is why it can feel strange or even unsettling at first. But silence also reveals something important about the nature of your mental activity. It shows you how unnecessary much of your thinking actually is. When thoughts pause, even briefly, nothing collapses. You don't vanish into nothingness. Your body continues functioning perfectly. Awareness remains present and clear. This directly undermines the deep belief that thinking is what keeps you alive or functional, that without constant mental activity, you would somehow cease to exist. Before sleep, silence is the doorway your mind must pass through to reach rest. If you keep dragging thoughts with you into that doorway, trying to carry your mental activity across the threshold, sleep stays shallow or delayed. When you allow silence to widen naturally without interference, sleep deepens on its own without any effort from you. Buddhism points out something subtle but transformative about silence. Silence isn't something you enter or achieve. It's something you stop leaving. Each thought pulls you away from silence. Each mental story you follow takes you further from the natural quiet underneath. When thoughts finally slow down on their own, you don't arrive somewhere new. You simply remain where you already are, where you've always been beneath the noise. This understanding fundamentally changes how you relate to the restlessness that often arises before sleep. Restlessness isn't a signal that something is wrong with you or your mind. It's simply your mind struggling to stay entertained when stimulation is being removed. Like a child who's been watching television for hours and then the screen goes dark, there's a moment of agitation, of not knowing what to do with themselves. When you see restlessness clearly for what it is, it loses its urgency and power over you. You don't have to fix it or make it go away. You can let it be there while you rest in the silence underneath it. Over time, learning to rest in silence before sleep has effects that extend far beyond the nighttime hours. You become less dependent on constant distraction during the day. You can tolerate moments of boredom without immediately reaching for your phone or filling the space with activity. You stop compulsively filling every moment with input, with information, with stimulation. This creates mental space. Space allows perspective. Perspective reduces reactivity. Silence, practiced gently and consistently, becomes one of the most powerful stabilizers of the mind. Buddhism doesn't encourage you to chase silent states or measure your progress toward deeper silence. That would turn silence into another object of craving, another goal to achieve, another way to feel insufficient. Instead, it simply asks you to stop interrupting the natural quiet that appears when effort relaxes. Before sleep right now, silence is already approaching. You don't need to help it arrive or make it happen. You only need to stop fighting it, stop filling it, stop covering it over with more thinking. Let your mind wind down without immediately replacing thought with another thought, story with another story. When silence is allowed to be what it is, not forced, not feared, not filled, your mind resets at a level deeper than ordinary sleep can provide. This isn't unconscious rest, where you simply shut down and disappear. This is conscious unwinding, where you remain aware as activity decreases and silence expands. Eventually, if you practice this regularly, silence stops feeling empty or void-like. It begins to feel full, steady, grounding. You stop fearing it because you recognize it as home, as the natural state you return to when you stop layering noise on top of it. When you can rest in silence, even briefly, sleep no longer feels like a loss of control or a disappearance into the unknown. It feels like a return to what's most fundamental, most real. There's a teaching from the forest tradition that says, in silence, the heart learns to hear itself. This isn't mystical poetry. It's practical observation. In silence, your mind finally stops broadcasting its constant stream of commentary and begins receiving what your body actually needs, what the present moment actually offers, what rest actually feels like. Most of your life, your mind has been the loudest voice in the room, drowning out everything else. In silence, that voice quiets enough that you can hear what was always there underneath it, the breath moving, the body settling, awareness, simply being aware without needing to say anything about it. Tonight, as thoughts begin to slow and gaps appear between them, resist the urge to immediately fill those gaps. Let there be space. Let there be quiet. Let there be nothing said. Not because you're trying to achieve some special meditative state, but because silence is where the mind naturally rests when it stops working so hard to exist. Like the forest Ajahn Chah sent his student to sit in, the silence was always there. The birds and wind and insects don't make it less silent. They're part of the silence, part of the natural soundscape. What makes it seem loud and chaotic is the constant inner commentary about what you're hearing, what it means, whether you're doing it right. When that commentary stops, you don't create silence. You discover it was there all along. The same is true now. Beneath your thoughts, beneath your stories about the day, beneath your worries about tomorrow, silence is already present. You don't have to dig for it or work toward it. You only have to stop covering it over. Let the gaps between thoughts widen naturally. Let the spaces grow without rushing to fill them. In those spaces, your mind finds what it's been seeking all along. Not more information, not better thoughts, not clever solutions. Just rest, just quiet, just the power of what you don't say. And in that power, sleep becomes effortless because there's finally nothing left keeping you awake. The Buddha once taught using a simple image that cuts straight to the heart of human suffering. Imagine you're walking through the forest and an arrow strikes you. There is pain, sharp, immediate, unavoidable. This is the first arrow. This is life happening. Now imagine that immediately after being struck by that arrow, you pick up a second arrow and shoot yourself with it. Why me? What did I do to deserve this? What's wrong with me that this happened? Why does this always happen to me? That second arrow, that's the suffering you add on top of the pain. The first arrow is life, unavoidable and impersonal. The second arrow is you, optional and very personal. A student listening to this teaching asked, "But Master, how do we not shoot the second arrow? The thoughts come automatically. I don't choose to think why me. It just appears." The Buddha replied, "See clearly that the second arrow is optional. See that why me is a habit, not a truth. When you see this clearly enough, the hand stops reaching for the second arrow on its own. The most deeply ingrained habit of the human mind is personalization. Whatever arises in your experience, your mind immediately frames it as happening to someone, to me, because of me, about me. This habit runs so automatically, so constantly, that most people never question it or even notice it's happening. Buddhism questions it directly because this single mental move multiplies suffering more than any external event ever could. Pain by itself is manageable. Physical sensation by itself is neutral. Even strong emotion can move through your system without leaving lasting damage. What turns pain into suffering is the moment your mind says, "This shouldn't be happening to me," or "This means something about who I am as a person." That interpretation, that personalization, locks the experience in place and turns it into something you must now carry, defend, explain, or fix. Before sleep, this habit of personalization becomes especially active and obvious. A memory appears from earlier today, maybe something you said that didn't land well. Instantly, it becomes my mistake. A fear arises about tomorrow, maybe a difficult conversation waiting for you. Immediately, it becomes my future that I must control. A feeling of heaviness settles in your chest. Without pause, it becomes my problem that something is wrong with me. The experience itself is temporary, constantly changing, impersonal. But the ownership you add makes it feel permanent, solid, and threatening. The Buddha dismantled this habit by asking people to observe something uncomfortable but ultimately liberating. Experiences happen, but they don't belong to anyone. Thoughts arise due to conditions, biology, memory, habit, stimulus, fatigue, what you ate, how you slept, what you witnessed today. Emotions surge due to chemistry, past conditioning, current circumstances, nervous system activation, hormones, countless factors you didn't choose and don't control. Sensations appear due to the body having nerves and a brain that processes signals. None of this requires a personal owner for it to happen. This doesn't mean experiences aren't felt. They absolutely are. The pain is real. The emotion is real. The sensation is real. What it means is that the extra layer of identity, this is happening to me personally layer, is optional. The suffering you experience is not caused by the thought or emotion itself. It's caused by the way you wrap it in a story of self, the way you make it mean something about who you are. Notice carefully how this operates at night. A simple sensation of restlessness appears in your body. Just energy, just movement, just the nervous system doing what nervous systems do. But instead of being felt as sensation, it immediately becomes, why am I like this? What's wrong with me that I can't relax like normal people? A passing wave of sadness moves through. Just emotion, just chemistry, just a temporary state arising from conditions. But it's instantly transformed into, there's something fundamentally broken in me. I shouldn't feel this way. The experience itself hasn't changed at all, but the interpretation has transformed it from a neutral, temporary phenomenon into a personal problem demanding immediate resolution. Personalization triggers urgency. If something is happening to you specifically, if it means something about who you are, then it must be fixed right now. This urgency keeps your nervous system on high alert and blocks the natural descent into sleep. Buddhism teaches you to remove the urgency by removing the ownership. Try this before sleep, when difficult thoughts or emotions arise. Instead of asking, "What does this mean about me?" ask, "What conditions produced this?" You're tired. Fatigue produces certain thoughts. You had a stressful interaction. The body is still processing it. You're lying in the dark. This naturally brings up unresolved concerns. You didn't sleep well last night. This affects emotional regulation. You're human. Humans experience the full range of thoughts and emotions. Once you see the causes, the conditions that gave rise to the experience, the personal charge weakens dramatically. The thought becomes an event, not a verdict on who you are. This shift is subtle but profound in its effects. Without personalization, emotions are allowed to complete their natural cycle. They rise, reach a peak, and dissolve on their own. With personalization, they get trapped in interpretation and repeat endlessly because you keep re-triggering them by making them about your identity. The Buddha emphasized this teaching because the self thrives on ownership. The moment you say, "my suffering," the self has something to defend, something to analyze, something to maintain and protect. When ownership drops, the self loses its relevance and grip, and with that loss comes profound relief. Many people fear this teaching when they first encounter it. They think it means denying responsibility or becoming passive about life. It doesn't mean that at all. Responsibility exists at the level of action, not at the level of identity. You can take full responsibility for your behavior, your choices, your impact on others, without turning every internal experience into a personal flaw or character defect. Before sleep, responsibility for action is irrelevant anyway, because there's nothing you can do right now. Personalization at night serves no purpose except to prolong suffering and prevent rest. Buddhism invites you to notice this clearly and stop participating in it. When you allow experiences to arise without claiming them as yours, a surprising calm appears. Not because everything suddenly feels good or pleasant, but because nothing feels like an emergency anymore. The body relaxes when it's no longer under constant attack from interpretation, when it's no longer being told that every sensation means something is wrong with you personally. Over time, this practice of removing ownership from experience changes how you relate to difficulty during the day as well. You stop taking every mood as a message about your worth or value. You stop treating every passing thought as a reflection of ultimate reality or truth about who you are. Life becomes lighter, more spacious, more workable, not because it gets easier, but because less of it is being carried as personal burden. Sleep improves naturally because your mind no longer feels responsible for managing, fixing, or explaining every internal fluctuation that occurs. You stop lying awake trying to fix yourself because you finally see clearly that there's nothing to fix. Experiences are simply happening based on conditions. That's all. The Buddha's insight here is both simple and unsettling. Suffering continues not because life is inherently cruel or because you've been uniquely cursed. It continues because you insist on making every experience about you, on taking everything personally, on wrapping every phenomenon in a story of self. When that insistence finally drops, suffering loosens its grip dramatically. Before sleep, you have a rare opportunity to practice this directly with immediate feedback. Let experiences happen without attaching your name to them. A thought arises, just a thought arising based on conditions. Not your thought, not a statement about who you are, just thought occurring. An emotion surfaces, just emotion moving through based on chemistry and circumstance. Not your emotion in the sense of being a permanent part of your identity, just emotion arising and passing. A sensation pulses, just sensation based on having a body with nerves. Not your personal problem to solve, just sensation being sensation. No owner, no story, just movement, just change, just phenomena unfolding according to natural law. In that simplicity, the mind finds genuine rest. Not because it has solved all its problems, or figured everything out, but because it has finally stopped making everything a personal issue, requiring personal resolution. This is the third arrow you didn't know you were shooting, the arrow of making pain about you. The first arrow is life. Difficult things happen. Uncomfortable sensations arise. Challenging emotions move through. The second arrow is the why me, and the interpretation, and the resistance. The third arrow, often invisible, is the deep personalization that makes you carry it all as if it defines who you are. Tonight, you can practice putting down that third arrow, not by becoming cold or detached from your experience, but by seeing clearly that experience doesn't require personal ownership to be felt, acknowledged, or responded to appropriately. Let the restlessness be just restlessness, not my restlessness. That means something is wrong with me. Let the anxiety be just anxiety arising from conditions, not my anxiety that defines my character. Let the tiredness be just tiredness, not my failure to manage my life correctly. When you stop making everything personal, everything becomes workable. When you stop taking everything as a statement about who you are, you can finally rest. Because rest doesn't require you to be anyone in particular. It doesn't require personal perfection or resolution. It just requires you to stop shooting the second and third arrows, to stop adding suffering on top of the unavoidable difficulties that are simply part of being alive. The Buddha taught this 26 centuries ago, and it remains as true tonight as it was then. The first arrow will come, that's life. But the second and third arrows, the suffering you add through personalization, those are optional. When you see this clearly, the hand reaches for those arrows less and less frequently. And eventually, it stops reaching entirely. Not because you've become superhuman or enlightened, but because you've finally seen what the Buddha saw. Suffering multiplies when you make it personal, and it dissolves when you let experience be impersonal. Tonight, let it be impersonal. Let it move through without claiming it. Let it be what it is without making it about who you are. And in that letting go of ownership, discover the rest you've been seeking all along. The Buddha once used an image that confused his students at first. He said, "A man needs to cross a dangerous river. The water is deep, the current is strong, and there's no bridge. So he gathers materials and builds himself a raft. He works hard on it, makes it strong and sturdy, ties it together carefully. He uses this raft to cross the river safely and reaches the far shore. Now, upon reaching the other side, should he lift the raft onto his shoulders and carry it on his back for the rest of his journey?" A student answered immediately, "Of course not, Master. The raft served its purpose. It was useful for crossing, but now it would only be a burden. He should let it go." The Buddha nodded. Exactly. In the same way, Even my teachings are to be let go of when their purpose is complete. How much more so, then, should you let go of the suffering you've been carrying, the worry, the regret, the endless mental replaying? These serve no purpose even when you pick them up. Why carry them any further? Another student protested, "But Master, how do we let go? I've been trying to release my anger for years. I've tried every technique, every practice. It won't leave." The Buddha smiled gently. That's precisely the problem. Letting go isn't something you do. It's what remains when you finally stop holding on. Most people fundamentally misunderstand what letting go means. They treat it as an action, a technique, something that requires effort and practice. Try to release the tension. Force yourself to relax. Drop the thought. Let it go. All of these are attempts to do something, to make something happen through effort and control. And this approach often backfires completely. The mind tightens further. Frustration builds. Sleep moves even further away. The Buddha cuts through this confusion with an uncomfortable truth. Letting go is not an action at all. It's what remains when you stop interfering with what's already happening. The interference is subtle and hard to notice at first. It shows up as adjusting your breath to make it better or more relaxed. It shows up as monitoring your state constantly. Am I calm yet? Am I getting closer to sleep? It shows up as checking whether you're relaxed enough, judging how well the letting go is going. None of this feels aggressive or forceful. It feels like you're helping, like you're doing what you should be doing. But all of it is control. And control, no matter how gentle or well-intentioned, keeps the nervous system active and engaged. Before sleep, this interference runs constantly in the background. Your mind tries to manage the transition into rest, like a project that needs supervision. Am I falling asleep yet? Why am I still awake? I need to calm down more. Maybe I should adjust my position. Am I breathing right? These thoughts seem reasonable, even necessary. They feel like you're taking care of yourself. But what they actually do is keep your attention engaged and prevent the natural shutdown that sleep requires. Buddhism teaches you something counterintuitive. Notice the management impulse without acting on it. Let the breath breathe itself without you trying to regulate it into some ideal pattern. Let the body settle into whatever position it needs without constantly adjusting and perfecting. Let attention drift and wander wherever it naturally goes without correcting it back to some object or focus. This feels counterintuitive because you've been trained your entire life to believe that effort produces results, that trying harder leads to success. But sleep disproves that belief every single night. You don't fall asleep by doing something more or trying harder. You fall asleep by stopping. Stopping the control. Stopping the evaluation. stopping the need to manage and guide the process. Letting go is simply what happens when you stop fixing this moment, stop trying to make it into something other than what it already is. When the mind is no longer correcting, adjusting, monitoring, judging, awareness naturally rests without friction or resistance. The system shifts from doing to being, from effort to ease, without any instruction or technique required. This is why sleep often arrives the moment you give up on trying to sleep. You've been lying there for an hour, trying everything, counting breaths, relaxing muscles, clearing your mind. Nothing works. Then finally you give up completely. Fine, I'm not going to sleep tonight. Whatever. And within minutes, sleep arrives. Because the moment effort dropped, the moment you stopped trying to control the process, your body was finally free to do what it knows how to do naturally. Buddhism recognizes this pattern and teaches you to trust it instead of fighting against it. This principle of non-interference applies to emotional content as well as physical rest. You don't need to release emotions or make them go away. You only need to stop holding them in place through constant interpretation and story making. When you stop explaining the emotion, justifying it, resisting it, or trying to fix it, the emotion completes its natural cycle on its own. It rises, peaks, and dissolves without your help or interference. Many people think they're bad at letting go because thoughts keep appearing in their mind. But that's a complete misunderstanding of what letting go means. Letting go doesn't mean the absence of thought or the achievement of a blank, empty mind. It means the absence of interference with thought, the absence of grabbing onto every thought that passes through. Thoughts can come and go freely, like clouds passing through the sky, without hooking your attention and pulling you into their story. Before sleep, allow your mind to wander wherever it wants to wander without providing commentary or correction. Don't follow thoughts into their storylines. Don't suppress them when they arise. Don't correct them toward better or more spiritual thoughts. This complete neutrality, this absence of interference, creates the perfect conditions for rest to emerge naturally. What the Buddha was teaching is the third noble truth, nirodha, the cessation of suffering. Not the cessation of pain itself, because pain is simply part of being alive in a body that feels. But the cessation of the suffering we add on top of pain through our clinging, our resistance, our desperate attempts to control what we cannot control. Cessation doesn't require force or tremendous effort. It requires understanding. When you see clearly how clinging operates, how it creates tension and suffering, your hand naturally opens and releases what it was holding. It's like holding a hot coal. You don't need willpower or practice to drop it. You just need to recognize clearly that it's burning you, and the hand opens by itself. The third noble truth is revolutionary because it declares something radical. Liberation is possible. Not someday in the distant future, not in your next life, not after years or decades of intensive practice. Right now, in this very moment, when you stop adding fuel to your suffering. That fuel is everything we've explored tonight. The resistance to what is, the craving for what isn't, the personalization of every experience, the desperate defense of a constructed identity, the refusal to let go of control. When these stop, suffering stops. Not because your life circumstances suddenly become perfect, but because your relationship to life transforms completely. Before sleep, the third noble truth becomes directly accessible in your immediate experience. You're lying still with nothing to achieve and nowhere to go. You're in the perfect laboratory for observing what happens when you stop trying to make this moment different. When you finally stop trying, what remains? Peace. Not a peace you created or earned through effort. Peace that was always there underneath the struggle, underneath all your attempts to force and control and fix. The Buddha's final instruction before rest is quiet and unspectacular. There is nothing to achieve, nothing to perfect, nothing to release or let go of through effort. When interference stops, letting go happens completely on its own. And in that absence of effort, that absence of trying, the mind finally, truly rests. This isn't giving up or becoming passive about your life. It's wisdom. It's recognizing that some things don't require your participation or management. Rest is one of those things. There's a teaching from the Buddha: let go of what belongs to the past. Let go of what belongs to the future. Let go of what belongs to the present. Cross to the farther shore of existence. Tonight, cross to the shore of rest, not by swimming harder or trying more strategies, but by allowing the current that's already moving to carry you. The raft served its purpose when you needed to cross the river of your day, but you've reached the shore now. The day is over. Let the raft go. Let the trying go. Let the effort go. What you're left with isn't nothing. It's rest. Pure, natural, effortless rest. And that's the only thing you ever needed to do. Stop doing and let it happen. There's an ancient teaching passed down in Buddhist monasteries. The wise person goes to sleep like laying down a heavy burden. Every night, you practice dying to the day. Not morbidly, naturally. Everything that happened today becomes past. Every identity you held becomes unnecessary for these hours. Every problem you carried can be set down. The Buddha taught this deliberately. He used death as a teacher, not to frighten, but to liberate. Death shows what's actually necessary. Very little. It shows what can be released. Almost everything. Tonight, is your practice ground. There is nothing you need to protect in the dark. No one watching. No story requiring maintenance. No self-needing defense. The day already ended. Reality already moved on. You were never meant to carry it all into the night. The Buddha once said, "Let go of what belongs to the past. Let go of what belongs to the future. And if you do not cling to what belongs to the present, you will cross beyond suffering." Tonight, you practice that crossing, not by doing anything, but by stopping the hold, stopping the carry, stopping the claim that you must bring everything with you. When you finally release your grip, something simple reveals itself. You don't disappear. You rest. These hours together are ending. Something has shifted. You feel it or you don't. Either way, the seeds have been planted. The Buddha's promise, what you see clearly, eventually sets you free. Rest deeply. Wake peacefully. Tomorrow comes soon enough.